Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Javar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. Chapter 1, Halacha 1, Part 2 of this shiur. We're going to get into something that's really, really deep because, again, Rebbe, when he put this here, this is not accidental. And in organizing the Mishnah and what comes first in the Mishnah, by putting the Shema first, there's some of the deepest points in all of Judaism for why Rebbe put this here and connecting it to what are we doing here in our life. Now, the Gemara is going to continue and it's going to say Rabbi Zera's, talking about, when is this statement of the Shema, and it says, regarding one who is uncertain whether he already said the Shema or he did not say the Shema, what is the law? In other words, it's asking, is the recitation of the Shema in the morning and the evening a biblical obligation regarding which we have to be very, very strict in the case of uncertainty, or is it going to be a rabbinical one where we can be more lenient? But again, as Rabbi Yochanan had said, it's good to do it because extra prayers are donative. They're just extra. They're good, right? It doesn't hurt you to do it. But is this really going to be a case of it being doraita, or is it going to be derabanan? And the Gemara is going to resolve the inquiry on this baraisa. It says, let us learn from this baraisa, one who recites the Shema before that time has not discharged his obligation and must repeat it in the proper time. Now, if one recites the Shema before that time, before, in other words, what's going to be coming is when the stars come out. Before the stars come out, there is not uncertainty whether or not he has discharged the obligation. So this is really talking about Judaism as a whole, okay? We are, as Jews, an organism, okay? It's like a human body. There's eyes, there's heart, there's liver, there's arms, there's legs. And we're here to carry out a function. We're here to tend the garden, which is a reference to what Hashem commanded Adam to do in Berechot. And we're here to perfect the world. We're here to perfect olam hazeh. Now, there's olam haba and there's olam hazeh. And we don't know, and nobody knows what olam haba is exactly. Okay, this is a world that is without forms. This is a world that is without material. This is a world that if we perfect ourselves, that we can get to. And the Jew's job is to be holy and is to earn his way through acts and mitzvot into olam haba. And so our job as Jews is to perfect this world for the world to come, and also olam haba. And we are required to do mitzvot in order to earn our way into olam haba. And this is saying that, one who recites the Shema before this time is not discharged an obligation. This is a deep theological point about Judaism, is that we're a religion of acts. And that if you're doing these acts out of sequence, out of time, out of order, that it doesn't count. That you have to do it in the right way. And it's like a computer program, okay? That you might have 50 steps, and if you're missing one or two of the steps, it's not going to work, okay? It's not like just, we're planting a potato and that, if the potato's a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right or a little bit deeper or a little bit more shallow, the potato's still going to grow. But in a more complex system where, like let's say your email, if you're putting a dot in the wrong place, your email doesn't work, it doesn't send, it doesn't recognize it. And it's the same thing here, that if you didn't do it in this way, like a 50-step computer program where there's one mistake in it, you have everything else right, but there's one thing out of order, okay, it doesn't work. And that's what this is saying here, that if you recite the Shema before that time, you have not done the obligation, and you have to repeat it at the proper time. But then you say, but Adam, you said the whole thing correctly. You had a lot of kavana. You did it, but you did it, 20 minutes before that time. It should count. And you have to come back and say, no, Judaism is like a computer program, that there are 50 steps. Each step has to be right. And if one step is not correct, you didn't do anything. You're not left with anything at the end of it. And, we're not a system where it's like growing potatoes, where if you plant it a little bit to the left of a row of potatoes or a little bit deeper, you're still going to have potatoes to grow. This is also, by the way, a secret slap at minim. Those would be early Christians that were popping up around the 200s, which is when this was written down by, this part here was put in here by Rabbi Yochanan. And what the Christians will be saying is they say, oh, well, you don't need any mitzvahs, you don't need any acts, that you just have faith and that's it. And Judaism comes along and says, well, you have to have emunah, but we're a religion of acts and doing things in a certain way. Now, the depth of this is that it's trying to show us, everything. Rebbe's showing everything about reality, existence, Judaism, right here, chapter 1, halacha 1. It's showing this idea of holiness, this idea of trying to get into olam haba. We have this idea of the bread of shame through deeds. And that, Hashem created, and one of the deepest ideas is, why did Hashem create shame in the human being? He could have created a human being without shame. If you get something for nothing, if you get something without working for it, you feel shame. In getting into olam haba, it's constructed where, why is this world here? That's the deepest question no physicist can answer. Why is this? Why is there something? Why is there not nothing? And Hashem could have created olam haba without olam hazeh, without this world, but he didn't. And that's also a question or an answer that only Jews and Judaism can answer. Why is it that this world is created here and olam haba is created there? Only Judaism can answer those questions. Physics cannot, science cannot. Science can't even answer why is there, this world. Judaism can. And this is showing us here with this mitzvah and with looking at the stars, something that is so deep. And, we're talking about the appearance of stars, and that if you said this act before the appearance of stars, you didn't do anything yet. And so the Gemara is gonna continue, and it's gonna say, yet you say in the Beraisa that he has not discharged his obligation, meaning that he definitely must recite the Shema again. And this tells us that if one is uncertain whether he already recited the Shema that morning or evening, or that he did not recite it, he is required to recite it again out of doubt. So that this is a question, okay, well, is this going to be Doraita or Dorabanan? And, the requirement that you have to say it definitely again is because, the passage in the Torah says it is in fact is in fact a biblical law. It's written in the Torah. So the Gemara now is going to get into this next deep point about something about how all of reality is put together and why the Shema is so essential. Okay, and so the Gemara now is going to talk about this the brisa that's going to get more precise into when the Kohanim who are Tamei and when they can eat, and talking about the appearance of the stars. And the Gemara says the sign for this matter, in other words, the siman, okay, is the sign of definite nightfall, which allows the Kohanim who are immersed before eating truma and all people to begin reciting the Shema, and that is the appearance of the stars. And even though there is no definitive proof to the matter that the night begins when the stars appear, there is an indication for this matter in the following verses. It says, this is going to be from Nehemiah 4:15, and it's going to say from Nehemiah, so we did the work with half of them grasping the spears from the rising of dawn until the appearance of the stars. So there's going to be another verse that's going to say, and it is further written, and the night was for us a watch and the day for work. So this is talking about the Babylonian exile and when they came back and they started to rebuild Jerusalem. And it shows that the workday started from the night until the stars began. Now, this is not talking about that the stars coming out, the three stars coming out, is definite proof for being night. This is really showing that this is a siman for when you're allowed to eat the truma and when you're allowed to say the Shema, the earliest time. Don't read it as a definite proof for being night. It's not necessarily the definite proof for being night, but it is definite proof for a oral law that we have that this is the time when we can do it. This is the earliest time we can do it. Now, I want to get into something a little bit agodic about this, okay? You, as a person, have senses, and you are looking up at the stars to see three of them to determine whether you can say the Shema or not. Now, you have in here a lot of ideas, okay? You have this idea of self, okay? You have this idea of sight. You know, you have five senses. You know, you have smell, touch, taste. And really, the sense is really generated by the mind. It's really constructed by the mind, okay? There's not, in reality, the three stars that you see, okay, that's just an image and a picture that is created by your brain through your senses. And you look at it and you actually create this reality based as a product of the mind. That star is not really, as you see it, is not inherent in that product, okay? And there's really no such thing as that star as the way you see it. What's really happening is your mind is showing it to you, and that's really what's happening is this image that your brain constructs. And that's the same with all the senses. When you're eating food, okay, that food is, you know, you're detecting it as reality, but it's really an image of taste that your brain constructs. And the same with touch, and the same with smell, and everything else. Vision is really a creation from the mind, and really the mind makes it into an image, and it's really just a creation of the brain. And you know, when you're looking at these stars, are you really seeing them? And in a way, no. Why is that? Because the person is the center of reality, okay? In many ways, you are constructing reality continuously with your senses, okay? Now, we know that we can sense and we can detect that there's an internal and an external, okay? We can know that, you know, inside of me is this internal thing of self. I know what is self. I know what is me. And I can detect through the senses, even though they're not perfect, this not self, this outside, this thing that's outside of me. And you know, I can look outside and I can sense these things, and I can tell that I did not create these things, okay? And you know, again, these are not inherent in the product from, you know, what you're looking at with the mind of these stars. And you know, each sense is creating this image, and we don't really know what reality is. We just experience it as awareness. We just experience it as images, and we have this self-awareness that we are here, okay? But we're not exactly sure what is reality. Nobody really even knows, okay? And you know, when you look at the highest levels of physics, you know, if you're looking at a fan in a room, that fan might be spinning, and you know, the fan is not really there. It's really just made up of a lot of electrons that are spinning very quickly. And we're using our senses, and we can detect something that looks like a fan, but in reality, you know, each electron is pretty far from each other, and it's just this collection of electrons that's there, and our senses construct it into a visual image, and it's all manufactured by our brain. Now, this inside self, we have emotions, we have feelings, we have things that we can be aware of that, you know, we are here, and that we are aware that we can think, and that we're also aware that there's something outside, and we can sense that we did not create this thing that's outside. Now, getting into this idea of shame, and what this is really about is this is really about this sense of feeling power, like I can control reality, and I can, look at me, all the work that I did, and look at all the money I made, and whatever, I can create reality. And that's this feeling of power. But really, the idea of shame is this realization that I don't control reality, and I'm really less than what I think I am. And, we're trying to earn olam haba through deeds. And this idea of bread of shame, it's doing these mitzvahs so that it's reinforcing in us this understanding of how to deal with reality, where I realize I'm not in control. I don't control reality. And so these simanim of stars is really this inflection point where it's this connection of inside self and outside self and senses. And then what the Torah is mandating is that at this time, you're supposed to try to connect with the ultimate reality in the universe, which is a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and say the Shema, which is the connection between inside self and outside self. And when is that time? It's when you have this mental image of appearance of stars. So all this put here by Rebbe is not accidental. It's really a statement about the senses. It's really a statement about inside self, outside self. It's really a statement of theology, about, we're a religion of acts, we're a religion of precision in those acts, and that's to connect you to the only reality, not these mental pictures and images that are really just collections in the brain. It's the only way to pull you out of these mental images that you have from senses, and to connect you to the ultimate reality. And so that's really what's so profound about what's going on here, where right in the start we're talking about the appearance of stars, and we're talking about purity, and we're talking about when we can start this service to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's when the Kohanim can restart this service with the ultimate reality in the universe. So the Gemara is going to continue, and it's going to clarify what is meant by the appearance of stars. And it says, how many stars must come out for it to be considered night? Rabbi Pinchas, in the name of Rabbi Abba Bar Papa, said, when only one star is visible, it is definite day. When two stars are visible, it is uncertain whether it is day or night, for this is the time of Ben Hashamashos. And when there's three stars that are visible, it is definite night. And the Gemara wonders, can it be that when two stars are visible, there is uncertainty whether it is day or night? And the Gemara says, but it is written in the verse cited above, until the appearance of two stars. Is it not the least amount that can be called stars in the plural form of two? In other words, the Gemara is now going to be asking a question. Since the verse does not specify more than two, it implies that the appearance of at least, two stars, wouldn't it constitute, actual nightfall? The Gemara is going to answer that, and it's going to say that the first star does not count toward the stars whose appearance is a sign of nightfall, because one star is visible by day. Thus, the verse means that nightfall takes place when there's two additional stars. In other words, there's always going to be a star that you can see as the day is waning. That'll be the North Star. And so it's not talking about that. When it's adding this word stars, really it's saying that you have that star that's already there, and then you're adding two stars, and that's how you're coming up with three. The Pnei Moshe says about this, it says that, it is taught that very bright stars that are visible by day do not count toward the three stars that indicate nightfall. It is the medium stars that are indicators of the nightfall. Thus, when the Gemara here states that the first star does not count, it means that the first of the medium stars cannot be counted, and it is possible in some conditions to discern even one medium star before the advent of night, so this verse does not reckon the first to appear among the two that signal definite nightfall. So that's a bit of a clarification on how they're getting these two stars. Don't read it as there's a star and then there's a second star and that's two. You should be reading it more like there's in the late afternoon you can see a star, and then the appearance of extra medium ones to connect with that one. That's how you should be looking at it. So in other words, the the first star isn't necessarily going to count because that's going to be visible by the day. So really, when this verse is talking about nightfall taking place, when it's really when you have two additional stars that pop out, and that's how you're getting up with stars. Stars really doesn't mean that there's two in the sky. It really means that there's three in the sky because you're already counting the one that was there. Rabbi Pinchas now is going to take this in a really neat direction, and he's going to try to understand this with another case of time. Now, in this universe, we have time. It's one of the things that Hashem is above time, but we have time in order for simanim and order for us to be able to do the mitzvahs with precision. And one of the things that was first done with time is the creation of the first day. And that, in Bereshit's even happening, this instant first part of creation is even happening before time, because you have the telling of time is occurring after the word of Bereshit. In other words, that you have Hashem above time, and that it's out. Hashem is outside of time, and that time is just a creation that Hashem made, just like your brain that processes these images, and that it's something that we have in this reality as being for using for doing the mitzvahs. Now, when you go to olam haba is going to be a place that is going to effectively be outside of time, and so that when you do the mitzvahs and you earn your way in, that you're existing in some state that we don't know. It's a non-material state, and we're existing in some non-material state that's outside of time. So Rabbi Pinchas continues, and he says, on the eve of Shabbos, if one saw one star and performed a malacha, he is exempt from bringing an offering because the Shabbos definitely is not begun yet. In other words, if it's Friday and you look up, you see one star, it's late afternoon, and you do a malacha. Let's say you prune your grapevine. Okay, definitely, says Rabbi Pinchas, you're exempt. You didn't violate Shabbos because there's that one star. Now, he says in the Gemara, if he saw two stars, he performed a malacha. He brings an asham tuloi offering because the Shabbos may have already begun, and so it is a suffix, but it's a possible desecration of the Shabbos. And the asham tuloi offering is a case where you might have done something wrong and you're not sure if you did or you didn't, so you're making an atonement. And so that's why you would bring the asham tuloi. It's not a definite chatas, it's not a definite sin, it's a suffix sin. You're not sure if it is. So that if you're doing the malacha, if you're cutting your grapevine, when you see that second star on late Friday, then you're going to bring this offering for doubt, okay? And then if you saw three stars and you perform a malacha, like cutting that vine, he brings a chatas offering because the Shabbos definitely has begun and he definitely desecrated it. So the case here is talking about not the end of Shabbos, but the start of Shabbos, and that's an interesting point that he's starting with the start of it, and in some way, it's easier to understand this with the stars than if he started with the end of Shabbos. In other words, you can see that it's not quite Shabbos yet, didn't quite happen yet, didn't happen yet, didn't quite happen yet. Maybe it happened, and then after the three stars, it definitely happened. And really, what Rabbi Pinchas is bringing out is that this is like that. Okay, the start of Shabbos with the counting of the stars, 1 star, 2 star, 3 stars, is like saying the Shema, 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars. It's now you're able to eat the truma. You're now able to eat or say the Shema, and it's like the same kind of case. And now Rabbi Pinchas is going to talk about the conclusion of Shabbos, also with the stars. So he takes and he says, upon the conclusion of Shabbos, says Gemara, the opposite laws apply. If someone saw 1 star, he performed a malacha. If, before Motzei Shabbos, he, and he would have to bring a chatas. If he saw 1 star, he cuts his grapevine. He has to bring a chatas offering because he definitely made a sin. He definitely violated the Shabbos. Now, in the same case, if he saw 2 stars and he performed a malacha, he brings an asham tuloi offering. These are the offerings in case of doubt. You're not sure. Maybe you made a sin. Maybe you're not. Only heaven knows. But you still have to bring an asham tuloi in case you did make it, in order to fix things in Shemayim between you and Shemayim. You have to bring this offering in case of suffix. And so you would have to bring that kind of offering because maybe the Shabbos already ended, maybe not, and it's questionable whether you desecrated it or not. Now, the next case, if he saw 3 stars and he performed a malacha, like he cut the grapevines, he is exempt from bringing any offering at all because the Shabbos has ended, and he definitely did not desecrate it. So that's a really neat idea that we're using it to determine it. Now, again, you could say, well, maybe night actually ends a little bit later. Maybe in some periods of time you can still see some sort of light in the sky, depending on how far north or south you are in the hemisphere, and that if you're looking at the stars, you could have it where there's still a lot of light out, so or more than you would expect. So that's the point of bringing in this verse before from Nehemiah, because the verse there is showing that this is not necessarily night. This is just the earliest time when you can say and do these things. Okay. So it's not a definite proof that this is night. In fact, it's not trying to prove this is night. All it's trying to prove is that this is when we're counting for the next period of time. That's the point. Okay, so just like in Nehemiah, this is when we stopped working on the walls for the Ole Bavel, that in Jerusalem, and this is the period of time when the work ended. It's not saying that this is definite night. This is just saying that this is the period when we're using it to say this was yesterday and this is now the next halachic day. It's not the time for saying that this is necessarily definite night. It doesn't have to be definite night. And in fact, if you're going to some of the northern places, or like in Holland or something like that, you might end up in a case where you can see these 3 stars and there's still a lot of light out there. So again, these are simanim for determining it, because what if you are going to somewhere in a different hemisphere than Eretz Yisrael, right? So that it's not a case that this is definite night. It's a case that the page is turned and this is now the next day. And so Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Bun, analyzed this law, and he stated that even if you say that when two stars are visible, it is questionable whether night has fallen, it is still possible for someone who performs a malacha at that time to be definitely liable as follows. So, in other words, he's saying that, Rabbi Yossi is saying that, even if you say, in other words, that, because there's a dissenting opinion on, whether the two stars is gonna show definite nightfall, you know, it's gonna be this suffix on whether maybe two stars is going to be this cutoff. So here's how they're going to you know try to determine whether if somebody performs a malacha at the time of two stars, whether he's going to be definitely liable or not. So the Gemara says, if someone saw two stars on the eve of Shabbos and he readied himself to perform a malacha, and they warned him that this was prohibited and punishable by death, but he went and he performed the malacha anyway, and then he saw two stars at the conclusion of Shabbos, and he readied himself to perform the malacha, and they warned him that this was prohibited and punishable by death, but he went ahead and performed the malacha anyway. The law is that however you want to view the status of the period when the two stars are visible, he is liable to death for having desecrated the Shabbos. So in other words, he's saying that whether this is legally day or legally night, if the person is legally warned, then the person incurred a definite liability, and he would have a death penalty. So that's going to be a very strong proof. And the Gemara says, if the first stars which he saw when the Shabbos was commencing are indicative that it is still day, because night does not begin until a third star appears, then the later stars which he saw when the Shabbos was ending are likewise indicative that it is still yet day, and thus he will be liable on account of the act that he's committing in the presence of later stars, because before a third star appeared at the end of Shabbos, and if the later stars are indicative that it's already night, because night actually begins when two stars are visible, then, says the Gemara, the former stars are likewise indicative that it is already night, and he will be liable on account of the act that he commenced in the presence of the former stars. In other words, when two stars were already visible at the outside of Shabbat, although we're uncertain whether the time at which two stars are visible is considered day or night, the perpetrator is definitely liable for the malacha he performed during one of the periods in question. So if he's warned in this period of question, he's definitely liable if he does it. It's not a case of suffix if he does it. If there's a warning, two warnings, okay, and he's warned again, and then he goes and he does it in front of the witnesses. He's warned, and then he goes and he does it in front of the witnesses, and goes ahead and does it anyway. Even though it's going to be when that second star is out, on the case of the end of Shabbat, he's definitely going to be liable. So that's a wrinkle in this law, is that in the case of not having the warning, he brings the asham taloi because he's not exactly sure. But now when he has the witnesses and the warnings, he definitely has that liability. So that's an interesting chiddush. The Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Bun, continues with the ruling pertaining to this variation about this case. And the following ruling involves a person who was not forewarned and desecrated the Shabbos unintentionally, and it pertains to his liability to a chatas offering for the transgression. So the Gemara reads that if someone saw two stars on the eve of the Shabbos and he reaped half a dried fig's measure of produce, then he arose in the morning of Shabbat and reaped another half of a dried fig's measure, and finally, when two stars at the conclusion of the Shabbos, and he reaped yet another half of a dried fig's measure, then however you want to view the status of that period when the two stars are visible, he is liable to a chatas offering. In other words, says the Rambam about this. He's saying that the Gemara refers to a case in which all these acts are performed in one lapse of awareness, meaning that the person did not become aware between the acts when he did the act, and that it was prohibited. And the law is that if someone commits an unintentional transgression in two parts, his acts combine for liability for a chatas as long as they were performed in a single act of awareness. You can find that, by the way, in Shabbos chapter 7 in Halacha 2. He saw two stars at the conclusion of Shabbos, and he reaped yet another half of a dried figs of measure. And however you want to view the status of the period with the two stars, he's liable to a chatas offering. And if the first stars, which he saw when the Shabbos was beginning, are indicative that it is still day, because night does not begin until the third star appears, then the later stars, which he saw when the Shabbos was ending, are likewise indicative that it is still day. So his last half measure of reaping took place on the Shabbos. Thus, the Shabbos morning's reaping of a half measure will combine with the end of Shabbos's reaping of a half measure. Now, keep in mind, there are minimums for things. So the minimum is a half measure for figs, for dried figs, okay? So let's say, the minimum measure is one measure, okay? So if he did half of that, okay, in one part, the beginning part, it's going to be where he's not guilty. And if he does a later part, another half part later, then they'll combine with this one and that one combining together on the same Shabbos. Okay, so the Gemara is basically saying, well, if he did it where, he's doing it in this, in between time, is he going to be liable when he cuts the half measure on Shabbat? So it is saying that, let me read this again. The Gemara is saying, thus, the Shabbos morning's reaping of a half measure will combine with the end of Shabbos's reaping of a half measure, and he will be liable to a chatas offering on account of the morning reaping combined with the reaping he performed when the later stars are visible before the Shabbos ended. And the Gemara continues, says, and if the later stars are indicative that it is already night, because the night actually begins when two stars appear, then the former stars are also indicative that it is already night, so that the first half measure reaping actually took place on Shabbos. Thus, the Shabbos morning's reaping of the half measure will combine with the eve of the Shabbos reaping of a half measure, and it will be liable on account of the morning reaping combined with the reaping he performed when the former stars were visible after the Shabbos commenced. So, although we're uncertain whether the time when two stars are visible is going to be considered day or night, if the perpetrator, cut the half measure when the two stars are out, he is definitely liable to a chatas on account of the reaping he performed during one of the periods in question. So the Pnei Moshe here is saying that the same law would seem to apply to the intentional sinner with respect to the death penalty. And by speaking here of an unintentional transgression, the Gemara informs us that even though many hours elapsed between the two half measures of malacha for the reaping of the figs, between the eve of the Shabbos' reaping and the Shabbos morning reaping, or the other case of the Shabbos morning's reaping and the end of Shabbos reaping, they are deemed to have performed a malacha in apse of awareness. And since a person did not actually become aware of the prohibition between the two, they're gonna have a problem, because the two parts combine, and even if one of the parts was done at this in between time where it was done, where the second star came out, he's definitely going to be liable. So and by the way, that's why you have to bring the Asham Taloy if you do the work without the warning, in an unintentional lapse of awareness, because you might have done it. But if you are warned, even if you're doing a half measure earlier and a half measure at that time, it's a definite chatas offering. That's what's so interesting about this law. Having discussed these various laws dealing with the two stars, now the Gemara is going to get back to this basic rule about 3 stars coming out and if it's going to be definite nightfall or not. So is 3 stars going to be definite nightfall, or is it going to be a thing where this is really a siman, and this is really just when the time, the time has changed, and maybe definite night's a little bit later. So the Gemara is going to try to figure this out, and this Gemara says this was stated specifically regarding those stars that were not commonly visible by the day. And it says, however, regarding those stars that are commonly visible by the day, we do not measure nightfall with them. In other words, the Bavli is pointing out in Shabbos 35b that we're not speaking of large stars that are visible even by the day, even when there's still light, nor are we talking about small stars that are visible only at night when it's completely dark. Rather, we're talking about medium-sized stars. So we're trying to find these medium-sized stars and add them together. So the definition is clarified. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Bun, said, in actuality, night is deemed to have fallen only when 3 stars besides the star known as the Kochavta is visible. So this is saying that the Kochavta, which is going to be like this commonly visible North Star that's very, very light. By the way, there are some people who say that this Kochavta could actually be Venus because it shines very brightly before sunset. So in actuality, it might not actually be a star. Or, by the way, it could also be Jupiter in some seasons and some locations in the world. So we're looking at 3 stars besides this one. Okay, that the other opinion is that it's taking these 2 stars and not necessarily adding it to this Kochavta, but it's really, you need to have the Kochavta out there because it might not be a star, it might be Venus, or in some cases Jupiter, depending on where you're located in the world, and you have to have 3 stars. Again, we're trying to dial in and be like, is this going to be night? When is it going to be night? So it could be that perhaps by waiting for these 3 stars after this bright North Star, or perhaps Venus, or perhaps Jupiter is out, that puts that time a little bit later. And it's not looking for 3 stars that are so small that you only see them at night. It's not looking at the big stars that could be out because they might not actually be stars. It might be a planet. So it's looking for these medium-sized stars that become visible. So the Gemara now is going to cite a different opinion as to the number of stars that is going to signal nightfall. Rabbi Yaakov the Southerner, in the name of Rabbi Yudah ben Pazi, said, when only 1 star has appeared, it is still definitely day, but as soon as 2 stars are visible, it is definitely night. Now that seems to be a very surprising opinion. Now, I want to point out that in the Yerushalmi, there's always going to be a not disagreement, but there's always going to be a thing about the people, the Southerners. Those are people who are south of Tiberias or Tzipori, and the quality of the scholarship in the north, which will be Tiberias and Tzipori. Don't forget, the Sanhedrin moved to that area up north, so the scholars ended up moving. So whoever was left is not necessarily part of the Sanhedrin, not necessarily part of the premier scholarship. And so, okay, so maybe their opinions, the Gemara is not going to regard their opinions, the Southerners' opinions, as as highly. Okay, so the Gemara wonders about this opinion, and I think also you do as well. I mean, it seems to be a bit surprising. So the Gemara asks and says, does he not hold that there is a period of uncertainty between definite day and definite night? And surely there's a time that is considered where it's going to be this in-between time. Gemara answers and says, he holds that there is a period of uncertainty between the appearance of the first star and the appearance of the second star. In other words, Pnei Moshe says, when Rabbi Yaakov states that when only one star has appeared, it is still definitely day, he refers to the first moment at which that star becomes visible, and the very next moment marks the onset of Ben Hashamashos, and that period of uncertainty lasts until the appearance of the second star. By contrast, Rabbi Pinchas holds that as long as only one star is visible, it is still definitely day, and this in-between time lasts from the appearance of the second star until the appearance of the third star. So this is a agreement about this in-between time. Is the in-between time going to be when the appearance of the first star happens and then the second star? Or it's going to be like Rabbi Pinchas, where it's going to be that this in-between time is going to be the appearance of the second star. First star is already out. Second star and the third star. So the Gemara is going to try to, present another sign of nightfall. And it was taught in a Beraisa, as long as the eastern face of the sky is reddening, this is still day. When it has grayed, this is bin ha-shamashos. And when it has blackened and the upper part of the sky has attained the same color as the lower part, this is night, and the period of ben ha-shamashos is over. So that's a really interesting way to look at it. Now tomorrow we're going to get into, in part 3, we're going to get into other cases about when the moon and when the sun is shining and the moon. But right now we're ending it off where we're looking at definite night being this case about the lighting in the sky itself more than the question of the 3 stars. So it's very possible it's like this verse in Nehemiah, where the 3 stars are the signal that, and it's again these 3 medium stars. Okay, we're not counting this one that could be a planet. It's saying that these 3 stars are there, and it's this is the time when the definitely, like, okay, you wouldn't get a chatas if you were warned and you did a malacha on Shabbat, because the time has changed and you're now out of Shabbat. Okay, and definitely you see these stars now. You can eat your truma. Now you can say the Shema. And what is going to be the sign of night? Not necessarily this time change of when the stars appear, but having to do with the lighting. In other words, this Gemara reads, as long as the eastern face of the sky is reddening, this is still day. And when it is grayed, this is bin ha-shamashos, and when it is blackened, and the upper part of the sky is the same color as the lower part of the sky, this is night, and that period of bin ha-shamashos is over. So that's a really interesting, deep way to look at it. But I want you to be aware that the case of when is the Shema said, and it connecting over to Berechot and the creation of time, night and day, one day, night and day, 2 days, night and day, 3 days, and talking about the 6-day creation, and then talking about the stars, which are also created during the days, and using these as the tools for indicating the Shema. That if you didn't say the Shema, before this time, that you have to say it again, and that this is really trying to teach us that Judaism is a religion of acts and that we are a people and we are connected to a place that's going to be Eretz Yisrael, and we are connected with time and with holidays, and we are connected with a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and Kodesh Baruch Hu is the only reality, Ein Od Milvado, and that we have an inside self and an external self, and that we have these senses, and that we're trying to figure out what is reality, and that the Shema is a tool that connects us with the only reality, which is that there is only Hashem. And so that once we realize this, and we realize that we're not as powerful and we're not controlling reality, that there's something outside of us that's controlling reality, we end up starting to have a different sort of feeling in our life, and we can walk together with Hashem. That's the point. But this chapter 1, Halacha 1, has so much depth to it, with looking at the stars and seeing senses and what are senses, and using this as a tool to connect us with reality. It's really beautiful. Thank you so much.